Once upon a time, in a village of Bila, there lived a newly wedded couple, Unamdi and Unika. Unamdi was a very handsome man. He was very hardworking. He worked for a construction company, while Unika was a full-time housewife. She was also industrious. She made a little farm at the back of our house. They were always seen together. They go out together, eat together, play together, do everything together. They were loved by their neighbors and families. Shortly after they got married, Nneka got pregnant. They were both happy. All through her pregnancy, she never had any complication. She was sound and healthy, and her baby was doing fine. Nnamdi and Unika were the talk of the town. They were so attached to themselves. They were blessed by God. A year after they got married, Unika gave birth to a bundle of joy, a beautiful bouncing baby girl. She was named Daisy. She was so beautiful. Neighbors, family members, and friends came to see the newborn baby girl. Some said, "Oh, she looks just like her mother." Others said she looked just like her father. Everyone wanted to touch her and carry her. People coming in brought beautiful gifts for her. She was so precious to the family. Her smile was contagious. 1 year after Daisy's birth, Unika fell ill. She was so ill, she could not do anything. She could not take care of herself and her Daisy. Unamdi took Unika to a very powerful herbal doctor. The herbal doctor gave Unika some concoction to rub all over her body and also to drink. She was made to drink a lot of concoction so as to get well, but all to no avail. Unamdi took Unika to nearby villages to see other herbal doctors, but none of their concoction worked for Unika. Instead, the sickness grew worse. At this point, Unika could barely walk. On a fateful day, Unika called Nnamdi and thanked him for taking good care of her, for his support in making sure she gets back on her feet. She then instructed Nnamdi and begged him to take good care of their only child, Daisy. He should let nothing happen to her. She cried as she said these words. Daisy was almost 2 years old. Unika held Daisy by her side and cried the more. Unika was in so much pain. That night, they all slept with so much sadness. The next day, Nnamdi woke up and tried to wake Unika up for her to take her concussions, but she never woke up. She slept that night but never woke up again. Nnamdi wept. He held Daisy by his side and wept the more. Days later, Unika was buried. Nnamdi was devastated and heartbroken. How can this be happening to me? What have I done to deserve this? He said this as he cried. After the death of Unika, Nnamdi took care of Daisy. He did everything to make her happy, even though he was not happy and has lost his happiness and his joy. Nnamdi was a shadow of himself. He was depressed. His family came together and thought of what they could do to help Nnamdi. They decided to get him a new wife, which they believed would make Nnamdi forget about Unika and move on with his life. A marriage ceremony was organized and Nnamdi was given a wife. Her name was Amanda. He was forced to marry Amanda. After they got married, he realized that Amanda was nothing like Unika. She was so lazy, she was so dirty, so rude, and cared about no one but herself. She was always fighting with neighbors. She never loved Adaeze and was never nice to Adaeze. Adaeze, on the other hand, was scared of her. She yelled at her, punished her at every little mistake Adaeze made. A year after Nnamdi got married to Amanda, Amanda gave birth to a baby girl. She was named Ozioma. 2 years later, she gave birth to her second child, a baby girl named Urema. Adaeze became the house help in her father's house. She does the cleaning of the house, washing of the dirty dishes, washing of the clothes. She was maltreated by her stepmother. She got to bed very hungry most times. Nnamdi was not aware of this. She could not tell him for fear of her stepmother, Amanda, who threatened to deal with her if she should tell her father. Ozioma and Urema, her stepsisters, grew up to be as lazy as their mother. They never helped Adaeze with the house chores. They were so rude to Adaeze. They always report Adaeze to their mother. As years went by, Adaeze grew up to be a very beautiful young lady. She looked exactly like her mother. She was so respectful and helpful to people around her. She was admired by everyone in the village. Even with everything she was going through, she was always happy. Adaeze was admired by a lot of people in the village. One day, Amanda heard people talking about Adaeze and how they wished their sons would marry her. This made Amanda hated her the more. In the village of Bali, it was the custom for the prince of the Bali village to get married at a certain age. All the maidens were expected to dress in beautiful attires and take turns to dance before the prince in the palace. And whoever finds favor in the prince's eyes would be the bride to the prince. The king's messenger passed this information to the villagers and told them to prepare for that day. The old villagers were so happy. The prince in question had been in a faraway city. He had to come back to his village for the ceremony. The old villagers were busy getting ready for that day. When Amanda had the information, she got her two daughters everything they needed for the ceremony. The clothes, the beads. She made their hairs for them, and she also practiced some dance steps with her daughters. On the other hand, Adaeze had nothing new for the ceremony. Amanda thought of what to do to stop Adaeze from attending the ceremony. Finally, the day came. Every maiden in the village were seen wearing beautiful traditional attires. They had beads around their neck, their waist, their wrist, and their legs. Adaeze's stepsisters, Ozioma and Urema, were dressed and prepared for the ceremony. Amanda, after planning what she could do to stop Adaeze from attending the ceremony, she sent Adaeze to go to a village far away from their village. and deliver some items to her younger sister who lives there. Adaeze pleaded with her that she would go some other time, but she threatened Adaeze. Adaeze embarked on this journey. She asked to walk because there was no means of transportation. She cried. She was so unhappy. This was when she wished her mother was alive. The ceremony was about to start. All the guests were seated. The king, the queen, the prince, and dignitaries from other villages were all seated to watch the dance and get entertained. The maidens began to dance one after the other. Ozioma and Urema, Adaeze's stepsisters, were part of the maidens who danced. After the dance, it was the custom for the prince to choose a wife from the maiden. The prince walked up to the maidens one after the other. He was not pleased by any of the maidens, and he said, "None of the maidens pleases me." The king insisted that he choose from the maiden. He pleaded with his father, the king, to give him some days to choose his bride. The ceremony came to an end without the king choosing a bride for himself. It was late that night. Adaeze was walking back home. She was in tears. She thought to herself, "I have missed this beautiful ceremony." She was so sad. At this time, the prince decided to take a walk with some of his guards. He heard someone crying. The prince instructed the guards to bring the person crying to him. The prince saw her and asked her, "What is your name? Why are you crying?" She told the prince, "My name is Adaeze, and I was crying because I missed the great ceremony." And he asked her, "Why did you miss the ceremony?" She said, "My stepmother sent me to a village far away from our village to deliver some items to her sister." She said this as tears flowed from her eyes. The prince was captured by her beauty. Adaeze never knew she was speaking with the prince. She went further to explain everything that happened between her and her stepmother. He later made himself known to her. He told her that he was the prince of Bila village. She was so surprised. The prince then instructed his guards to take Adaeze to the palace. She should be treated like a member of the royal family. The next day, the prince guards went to Adaeze's father's house. They met Nnamdi sitting at the front of his house. He was told that one of his daughters had found favor in the sight of the prince, and the prince would want to marry her. Nnamdi was so happy. Amanda, sighting some royal visitors in her house, came out to find out the purpose of their visit. She was told the news. She was so happy. She thought one of her daughters had found favor in the sight of the prince. They were all invited to the palace to dine with the prince and also to know who among their daughters the prince had chosen. Nnamdi, Amanda, and her two daughters, Ozioma and Urema, prepared for the palace immediately. When they got to the palace, they were directed to the dining to eat and marry with the prince. The prince whispered to the guards to bring Adaeze. Adaeze came out dressed in royal attire meant for the queens. She was so beautiful. Amanda could hardly recognize Adaeze. She was shocked. Nnamdi was happy to see Adaeze. Amanda and her two daughters were so surprised, ashamed, and disappointed. The prince said Adaeze is the maiden he has chosen to be his bride. The prince told Nnamdi all the story Adaeze told him about how Amanda, her stepmother, and her two sisters, Ozioma and Urima, treated her. Nnamdi could not believe what he had. Adaeze, for the first time, opened up to her father and told her father everything she went through in the hands of her stepmother and her two stepsisters. The prince immediately called his guards to send Amanda and her two daughters out of the palace. Nnamdi was honored. He was given a beautiful apartment in the palace. He was treated as one of the members of the royal family. Days later, a royal wedding was organized. Dignitaries from neighboring villages came around. The king, the queen were happy that the prince made a good choice after hearing Adaeze's story.